Hi, everyone. We are starting to see the numbers climb up in our participants, the participant tracker here on our Zoom platform. Thanks for being here today with us on this beautiful June day. Okay, so we've seen the numbers start to kind of slow down a bit, so we're going to get right started. Thanks so much for being here today with us. Mel and I are going to have a conversation with you and nice open discussion and some questions for part 3 of our Setting Up Your Residence Council for Success series. So if you recall, we've gone through in December and in January 2 other OARC resources, our Residence Council agenda, along with our Residence Council minute template. And this time we're looking at a resource called the Understanding Our Law document.
All right, so I'm going to just say our land acknowledgement for today. So together, let us now pause as we acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today, from wherever we are virtually participating in today's meeting. Let us take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land we each call home. We do this to affirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. We acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this nation home. Let us now join in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and the mistakes of the past and to consider how each of us in our own way can move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration.
Thank you, Mel. And this month is Indigenous Peoples Month. So take a moment to recognize that as well. So some webinar housekeeping. You will notice that our chat box is disabled. However, the question and answer box is open, and we are monitoring that as we're talking and chatting today. So you are most welcome to put your questions into the question and answer box throughout the presentation as they come up. We have protected time at the end of the presentation to go through those questions with you. And if there's anything that we can't answer today, we can follow up with you afterwards. We did receive a number of questions that came in through the registration, so that was great. Thank you so much for submitting those. And we'll get to as many of those as we can. Just a word of notice to those on the call today. This webinar is about the Residence Council, what the law says about the Residence Council. So we did receive a number of questions that were specific to individual resident care or things like infection prevention and control. And those might be outside of the scope of this webinar. What we're really talking about is how the legislation, the long-term care home legislation, impacts the Residence Council, what the powers of the council are, what the responsibilities of the council are, and what the obligations of the operator are to the Residence Council. Okay, and as always, there will be a recording of this webinar available after. It will be on our website as well as emailed out to everyone who's registered for today.
And I'm just going to put in the chat a link to our website as well for those who need it, or in the question and answer.
Thank you. Okay, so we've mentioned a couple of times already, this is part 3 of our series, Setting Up Your Council for Success. We've received so much great feedback from the first 2 sessions, and this is part 3. So you'll see here, we will be reviewing together, similar as we did for the first 2 parts. We'll be reviewing this document together and answering any questions that you might have about the document. And also getting your comments and your reactions to this document. If you have any suggestions for how it could be improved, those are always most welcome and something that we look forward to. Okay, so let's talk about the Fixing Long-Term Care Act for a minute before we look at the document. So the Fixing Long-Term Care Act 2021 came into force in 2022 in April. And there have been some updates since then. One of the things that we were encouraged by and that we heard residents have told us they were encouraged by is the enhanced requirement or responsibility of the Residence Council. So the Residence Council plays a greater role in shaping the place that residents call home through the Residence Council. So for people who are listening, who are interested in numbers and that kind of thing, I'm a numbers person myself. To create this document, I went on to the Fixing Long-Term Care Act and searched through it for every time that Residence Council, the term Residence Councils, is used. So 49 times in the Fixing Long-Term Care Act, the term Residence Council is found. We need something to compare that to. What does that mean? What does that compare to some other terms? So I looked up some popular terms. The word nurse is used 30 times in the Fixing Long-Term Care Act. The word physician is used 16 times. Administrator is used 15 times. Infection is used 18 times. So residence councils are mentioned quite frequently when you compare them to other popular terms. That tells us that it's important. The ministry is telling us, we believe the ministry is telling us that residence councils are important. They're an important group in the home. Okay, the Fixing Long-Term Care Act also provides a framework for how the residence councils, what the powers are, what the responsibilities are, what information is to be shared with the residence council. So it's a framework. It doesn't give us all of the information about how to have a successful council, but it provides the framework, the foundation. It's up to us, it's up to the councils to fill in that framework and make it a really robust and full experience for all in the home. And the legislation is just one piece of this. We believe that the relationship between the Residence Council and the home's leadership is just as important as the legislation. So Mel and I have visited some homes where there's an imbalance between the importance placed on the legislation and the importance placed on the relationship. So where the relationship isn't so strong, there's this enhanced focus on the legislation, almost like the legislation is really being used to force interaction and a relationship. It works a lot better when there's an understanding and cooperation and collaboration between the residence council and the home's leadership. And then you can really view that view that legislation as the framework that it's intended to be. Because it doesn't have every single detail there. And that's intentional. Every council is different, every home is different. And so the residence council, the residents have an important job of determining how their council is going to run. And luckily, OARC is here to help support your council with information, with education, with advice, and with examples that we've collected from across the province. Mel has so many great experiences and examples of how things can work really well, and also examples of where things can improve. So we're really happy to have you here today with us, Mel, taking a break from visiting long-term care homes and being here with us to share your experiences.
Thank you so much, Steph.
Okay. I'm just gonna look over at the chat box or the question and answer box just before we start looking at the document. There's a question from Andrea, and the question says, could you please talk about how I believe that's residence council and family council can work together to the benefit of all residents, both the ones that attend the resident council meetings and the many that are no longer able to speak for themselves. Thanks for the question. We will save that and for the end. But great question. And for those on the call, one thing that's really special about these webinars is that we often get a home sharing that's taking place in the question and answer box. So when we read aloud one of these questions, other homes were jumping in saying, this is what we do. This is how we've done that. This works really well at our home. So encourage you to do that as well so that we could share those great stories and great examples that that you're already doing. Okay, so we're just going to exit out of this presentation and look over here at the document. So this document is 14 pages long, really 13. The first page is an introduction. And let me see if I can just make this a little bit bigger. Maybe oh, yes, I can. So we want you to be able to see it. Okay, so how this works is it's broken up into two parts. They look very similar. The first part pulls out all the places where residence councils are mentioned in the Act itself. So there's the Act, and then there's also the regulations. They're two separate things, but they work together. So the first part talks about the sections in the Act, and it goes in order as they appear in the Act. Our previous version of this document followed our template, our minutes template. But what we found is that homes are using their different templates. And so this document might not have been as user-friendly as we thought it was. It really initially was a companion document to that minutes template. But as time has gone on and people have customized their minute template, this document was not as easy to use as it was in the past. So now we follow the order that items come up in the Act itself. And something new also for this version is that if you click on any of these things here that are highlighted or underlined rather, it takes you right to the legislation. So many times we have calls from residents, from families, from team members saying, hey, can you help us find the section of the Act where it talks about this? We want, we heard that this is how it's supposed to go, but we're not sure. Where's the part of the Act where it says this? So you have the option to link back to click this and go back to the legislation, the official legislation, if what we've copied here for you doesn't answer the question that you have. Okay, so this first column here is what the section is called in the Act and then where to find it. So let me just scroll down so you see this next part here. Similarly, you can click on number 4 and it will take you back to the Act where it talks about the mission statement. Okay, then this middle section here, this middle section is the copy and paste of every place where it mentions residence council in the Act, and it corresponds to this first column. So if you don't want to click back, or if you're looking at this in a paper version, someone has printed it or you've printed it for yourself, and you don't have the option of going back and clicking on this, then you have it copied right here for you. So that makes the document a little bit longer, but also makes it so that you can use it in a printed version. Okay. So the first,
before you go on, there was just a question about how often do we update this document? So I just wanted to say that it was updated when the Long-Term Care Act changed.
Mhm.
So that would be the only time that we would really update it. If anything in the legislation changed, then we would update this document.
Right.
And
Thanks, Mel.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
so sometimes there are amendments that happen even after the, after since 2022, when the act came into force, there have been amendments and updates made. And so we would update the document at that time. Or if we've come up with, or we have a new resource or recommendation to share with you. So part of what we do is to ensure that the residence council residents, they're aware of their scope of influence in the home. And so we're always trying to come up with new tools, new fact sheets, a new webinar on topics that are of interest to residents and to residents councils, and on topics that we haven't covered before. So you will see some parts of this document where, some sections rather, where there isn't a recommendation or resource. Sometimes that's because the legislation is quite straightforward, and other times it's because a resource is in development. So great question about when it will be updated, and the simple answer is whenever there's a change to the legislation, or when we have a new recommendation or resource to share with you. Okay, so for the first part here, for Resident Bill of Rights, there are 29 rights, but we've only pulled out the 2 rights that are related to Residence Council, or that mention Residence Council specifically, because there are others that imply that Residence Council is affected. For example, the Resident Bill of Rights that says residents have the right to make friendships and be involved in the life of the home. Well, certainly Residence Council could be one of the ways that they do that, but it isn't mentioned specifically. So this document's sticking to where residence councils are mentioned specifically. So Resident Bill of Rights, every resident has the right to participate in residence council. So in the recommendations and resources, we've given you a link to the various translations of the Residence Bill of Rights that we have on our website. We've also given you a link to the Community Legal Education Ontario, the CLEO booklet, if you'd like to order copies for your home there. Okay. So that's the first section on Resident Bill of Rights. The next section is about the mission statement. So we don't have a recommendation here. What it says about mission statement is quite straightforward. What we possibly could provide are some examples that homes have used, or some examples of how a residence council has been involved in this process. So another great resource that we have that I haven't linked here because we don't have individual articles, the ability to pull out individual articles yet, is through our communications department. We have great home sharing stories. Like very recently, we had a story or an article about elections, how a home managed their elections process. And it would be great to link that article in this column for you, so you have a real life example and some connections. You could possibly even call up that home and speak to the council president there, or someone from the council leadership team, or even the council assistant, and ask some questions. We have heard of councils reaching out because they've heard of each other through our publications, and they've asked for a Zoom meeting or a telephone meeting. So there's nothing stopping you from doing that. You are most welcome to, if you're inspired by something that you've read in one of our publications, to reach out to the home and see if you can set up a virtual meeting with that council. That would be such a great thing to do, meet other residents and hear from them, ask questions to them, how they were able to do what they did.
So
So
with
this, yeah.
the mission statement, if there's another question, I'm just going to jump in whenever there's a question for
Mhm.
Steph.
Please.
just whose mission statement is this and who's creating it?
Great question. So this mission statement refers to the mission statement for the home. So the licensee's mission statement. Now, that's a great question because there are some residence councils who have their own mission statement. And that is, like we said, the Long-Term Care Act is a framework. So there's nothing stopping a residence council from saying, hey, we would also like to have our own mission statement. And hopefully they, or maybe they'll align with the one that the mission statement for the home, but maybe it won't. So definitely something that your council could look towards, setting a goal through a mission statement. So this section of the act just talks about the frequency that the mission statement should be updated. It's every 5 years, and mentions that residence councils shall be consulted. So there's a few words that we see through the act. There's consult, there's inform, there's collaborate, review. That's the one, not collaborate, review. Thanks, Mel.
Yeah, no worries.
So this one here is consult with. And this is a question that we get often. Well, what does consult mean? Because consult can look different from home to home. So what one home, how they exercise consulting or how they do consulting is different than how another home might do it. But what's important is that there is something that's happening here. There's some involvement of the residence council and the family council when it comes to the mission statement. So this is one that we can, if you have a great story and you're listening today about working with your home to create a mission statement, we'd love to hear from you so that perhaps we could link your article here, or we could collaborate on an article and link it here. Okay, the next big one is the resident and family caregiver experience survey. So this changed a little bit from the previous act. In the previous act, the residence council had to be consulted on the questions that were going to be involved or that were going to be featured in the survey. This one is different now. The residence council, the home has to seek the council's advice on how the survey is going to be conducted, how it's going to be carried out in the home. And what's super important, we've been seeing come up in inspection reports lately, is that the documentation of these things is so important. So it is possible that the home has met with the residence council and discussed what's happening with the survey, how the survey is going to be carried out. You know, it's going to be 3 weeks, a 3-week process. We have volunteers that are going to help. It's possible that that conversation did happen, but having the documentation about when the conversation happened is really important. So that's something you can include in your resident council minutes. And important for homes to notice too is that Mel and I have heard many homes are doing town halls, and a lot of this information is being shared in a town hall setting, which is great because we know that town hall, different formats of communication appeal to different residents. So not every resident goes to the residence council for various reasons. Some people might attend a town hall though, but the legislation is clear. It says the residence council needs to be informed of this. So even if a conversation or information was shared at a town hall, it's still important to have some dedicated time to speak with the council and to share that same information that was shared at the town hall. Or even it could even look like providing, if you take minutes for your town hall or have an agenda for your town hall, sharing that exact agenda with the residence council and attaching it to their minutes. That's an easy way to do it, and ensuring that that conversation was had with the council specifically. Okay. So that's the survey. We don't have something in that block too. So coming soon. Okay, and then the next major part talks specifically about residence council. So this is where you see the powers of the council, the rules about the council assistant. But first and foremost, every licensee of a long-term care home shall ensure that a residence council is established in the home. And then a question that we get often is, what does established mean? Does established mean that there's time blocked off on the recreation calendar and something is happening? Does it mean that a core group of residents are always attending? Does it mean that there is a meeting that's set up, but it gets canceled all the time, or the home is using that opportunity to share all of this information that they need to share, and the residents don't really have an opportunity to voice their opinions and share? What does established mean? That's a question that we get a lot. This link here takes you right back to our website where we talk about what is a residence council, why is there a residence council in the home? And that's something that we could look at after. That was a question that came through the registration questions about why do we have a residence council? Mel had a great answer earlier. I don't know if you want to share what you said.
Sure. I just said, the council is a place of a collective voice of coming together to be really able to give feedback of the place that they live. It's peer support. It's being able to be heard from one another, and to really gather together as co-residents and neighbors, to really give that feedback and support to those people who are giving their care and the
Yeah,
licensing. Mhm.
yeah, and it's not an uncommon idea. If you live in a condo building, for example, you might have a
Mhm.
tenant council or a tenant board. The people who live in the home have the right to, and there's the expectation that they shape the place that they call home. So we're not just um, downloading care and rules and services onto people. They are actually telling us what it is that they need and how to improve the place, and really build that sense of community, like Mel said. Okay, the next part is about who can attend a residence council meeting. So in the act, it says the residence council is only for residents. And we've shared here a fact sheet about meeting membership. And if you click through that, it's a really robust fact sheet that has some great information there. So everything is, you could kind of find everything from this one document now.
I
Okay,
think
powers of, yeah.
it's really good to, I just wanted to say this, it's really good to protect that too, that it is just residents, because there's a lot of other stakeholder groups. There's a lot of other um committees and people speaking on behalf and for residents. There's a lot of places for people to do that. And so this needs to be a protected place for the residents themselves, to be able to speak on their own behalf.
Right, that's such a good point. Um, and somebody asked a question about family council earlier. Family
Mhm.
council is really important, and we were often asked the question, well, what about residents who can't speak for themselves? How does their voice get heard at the residence council? Well, there's a couple of ways. One of them, how is their voice heard, right? So family council, as Mel was alluding to, family council exists partly for that reason. Is where the families, your family member best. You can bring up their concerns at family council if they're unable to do so at residence council, or in addition to
Mhm.
what's already being brought up at residence council. Another way that the voices or the needs of residents who don't attend residence council are addressed is through ongoing education opportunities for those who do attend, so that what OARC always says, what we always promote, is that when you're going to the residence council, we're trying to build capacity in the people who do attend those meetings. So when they go there, they're thinking about how, okay, well, this issue, suppose it's unstable staffing, right? A different team member every day, a different PSW every day, agency team members, that kind of thing. Suppose it's that. Well, yes, that really affects me as a person who attends the residence council. Well, it might also affect other people who don't attend the residence council. So taking a whole home view of what's going on, and improving things for all, even if they don't attend the council meetings. Other ways that you could do that is, we have some residents on our advisory group who actually have an invitation to attend family council or a portion of family council, and they share each other's minutes. They um, cross-reference, what issues are being brought up so that they could have a unified voice when they're addressing concerns in the home. So those are just a couple of ways that the
Yeah, I've
council.
also seen some homes do like a peer support. They'll do people who may not go to meetings, who may not be able to leave their rooms for many different reasons. They're not able to go to the meetings. So they'll do a peer support on their home area, have someone who does go to the meetings to be able to meet with them, to become friends, and then bring their concerns to the meetings on their behalf. And also I've seen lots of homes that I go into, councils do see what goes on. People who come to the council, a lot of times it is things that they've seen from other people's viewpoint, not their own. And they do speak up on each other's behalf. And it is important to have that as part of your resident council commitment, to be speaking up for those who cannot speak for themselves when you're in the meeting, or speaking up for things that are happening collectively on the floor and not just your individual needs. There is a question in there in our chat about gravitating towards talking about their own individual needs, and finding the resident council forum as a time to vent for your individual needs. And this is something also I've encouraged councils to do. And I've heard residents say, this is the only time that other people may be able to share what they're going through. This is I'm not going to cut someone off. A president I was speaking to the other day, I'm not going to cut someone off because maybe this is the only time that they were able to speak about it and get that support. So it's a balance, because you don't want that to take up the whole meeting, because there is an agenda to follow. So maybe having peer support groups after, or saying, talking to that person and saying, I see that this is an individual need in me. How about we all meet afterwards for a few minutes and talk about this with you and support you in what you're going through. So there are some things that, if you are finding that that's happening in your home, I've seen what other homes do. So please reach out to me and I can give you some more guidelines around that. Yeah.
Thanks, Mel. Such an important thing to bring up. And as we continue going through this document, you'll see where it talks about the resident council assistant. And one of the roles of the resident council assistant is to do just that, what Mel has mentioned there, is when these personal issues are being brought up at the residence council, to take a moment to really listen and empathize with what the person is sharing. We know that there is a fear of retaliation, a fear of bringing things up that residents experience. And so if someone has brought something up in any forum at residence council, where it's a protected, safe place for residents to share, really listening to where they're coming from, and then following. So the resident council, there's one pathway for resolving concerns through the residence council that we'll talk about shortly. And then there's the complaints process. So if it's an individual concern, the resident council assistant can help that resident to have their concern addressed through the other complaints resolution process that's available in your home. Okay, so the powers of the residence council, there are 10, and most of them are quite straightforward. Where we have quite a few questions is when it comes to this one here, number 4, sponsor and plan activities for residents. So a question that came through in the registration was, tell us about finances. We want to know about resident council finances. How does that work? What do we do about this? What does the Act say? So the Act doesn't really say anything about residence council finances, at least not explicitly. What it does say, though, in number 4, one of the powers of the residence council is that the residence council has the power to sponsor and plan activities for residents. So sponsor implies that there are finances available to the residence council that they have determination over. So that's where the resident council bank account or trust account or box with funds in it, where that idea has come from. Because in order to sponsor and plan an activity, the residence council does need funds that they have determination over. So the resource that we've shared here with you is a fact sheet about resident council finances. It's a good one to look at if you haven't seen it before. And any of these resources that you take a look at, and if you have further questions, both Mel and myself, anyone on our team, really, you can reach out to us and invite a further conversation about that specific resource, or join our resident forum on Thursdays at 2 p.m. or a resident council assistant forum on the last Tuesday of the month at 1:30 p.m. to get these questions answered, any specific questions you have about these things. Okay, the other one that we have questions about is this one here, review. So review, what does review mean? It's something to keep an eye out for, because again, in the inspection reports that we've been seeing as of late, homes who have undergone a proactive compliance inspection are receiving written notifications. They're corrected on the spot about not sharing non-compliances because the home has not shared these documents with the residence council. So overwhelmingly what we've seen is that there's been an exception made so that homes can remedy the non-compliance on the spot while the inspector's there. And what that looks like is an ad hoc meeting that's called an ad hoc meeting of the residence council is called, and all of these documents are shared with the residence council in one shot. One of our resident advisors shared with us that it was a 2-hour meeting where all of these documents were shared. And OARC, what we recommend is that throughout the year, you use our agenda template. All of the things that need to be shared are right there on the agenda template, and just put a date in so that at regular intervals, you're sharing some of these documents that need to be shared. So at the end of the year, you don't have this big long meeting where it's all the documents being shared at once. You have a schedule in place where you periodically look over these documents. So what are the documents that need to be reviewed? Inspection reports and summaries. The link here that we've given you is to the ministry's inspection. You can go on to look up your home, any inspections that have happened at your home, you can look those up. That's the link for that website. In addition to the public copies of the inspection reports, the home is also supposed to provide a copy to the residence council. Now, it used to be that the ministry would print and send a hard copy to the attention of the residence council, but during COVID, they stopped being printed, and now they're sent electronically to the home. So the responsibility now lies with the home's leadership team. So with the administrator or the director of care, whoever receives those reports needs to print them, ensure that they're the public copy, print them, and provide a copy to the residence council, in addition to posting one wherever in the home you post the inspection reports. It's really important to do that. We have worked with residents over the last few years who've said that their home has never had an inspection because they've never seen the inspection reports, they were not being shared with the council. So the residents' council was under the impression that, well, if the documents haven't been shared, it's because we haven't had an inspection in 3 years, which is not the case. And something new as well with this act is the requirement to share a plan for achieving compliance with the residents' council. So sometimes we hear, I see all these inspection reports from my home, but I never hear about what the home's doing to become compliant again.
Mhm.
I know they must have to do something. It's not just that they get this report and that's it, but it's not shared with the council. So there is a requirement to share the plan for achieving compliance with the council.
Mhm. And I hear from a lot of councils when I visit, that's the most important part. The issue is important, but how you're fixing it is actually more important than the actual issue too.
Yeah, they want to know that it's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
And we recommend inviting a conversation with your administrator or your director of care to come and talk to the council about what this inspection was all about. Sometimes the inspection reports are not easily understood.
Mhm.
Um, and so talking to the residents about what this inspection was all about, what triggered it, what caused it, and what you're going to do about it
Mhm.
is so important. And then the financial statements. So another one about financial statements. So the Ministry of Long-Term Care's fiscal year ends on March 31st every year. And the homes have to prepare a reconciliation report that is sent to the ministry. That's the document, the detailed allocation that is to be shared with the Residents' Council. So the Residents' Council has the power to review that document. We've heard from residents who have asked for it, and some of the responses that they've been receiving is, well, we don't have that here, that's at our head office, or that came out last June, so there isn't a current one. Um, Anything else, Mel? There just seems to be a hesitation to share this or to have residents review it, but it's actually in the act that residents council has the power to review this document.
Yeah, I think that was the reconciliation, the audit, the allocation, the funding. I get a lot of questions about the allocation of funding and what does that mean. And um, sometimes residents will say, well, they're making a profit off of the home. And so it's a great place to sort of talk about the allocation of funding, how it is detailed and required to give back how you have spent the money to the ministry and how everything is spent, just to alleviate the confusion around that sometimes.
Mhm. The funding that comes through the ministry envelopes, absolutely, that has to be used for its intended purpose, cannot be used for profit, for
Yeah.
ministry funding that's going into the nutrition envelope, the program and support services, and the nursing and personal care.
Yeah.
And if there are questions, it's an opportunity to have that conversation. Even if you don't have all the answers, administrators are not this mythical creature that has to have all of the answers, right? Lean into your team. If it is something at head office, maybe you can have someone from head office come in and do a presentation for your residents council, or a virtual town hall for all residents councils if you're part of the larger organization. Why not have something like that? You know that this is something that needs to be shared with the councils annually. You could do a virtual presentation for all the councils in your region or in your organization. Okay. Okay, here's another important one is the duty to respond. So we talked about the two pathways for bringing up concerns. Through the residents council, the concerns need to be responded to within 10 days of the administrator receiving them. So what we recommend is that if you're using our minute template, the very last page on the minute template that's linked here, has a space for the administrator to sign, acknowledging that they've received those minutes. And what we've heard from some residents who've had an inspection and other homes is that they're being asked for the full package of minutes rather than one page that lists concerns. And the reason for this is because the package of minutes provides important context about the meeting. It tells the inspector or whoever's looking at those minutes, the administrator, who was at the meeting, what other conversations might have been had leading up to the concern, and everything is right there in one place. So our recommendation has always been to provide the full package of minutes to your administrator and have them sign that they've received those minutes. The 10 days starts from then. So it doesn't start from the day that the meeting took place. It doesn't start from the next meeting where the residence council has approved the minutes. It starts from when the administrator has received that package of minutes. So it could be that your home has a process in place where the meeting is held one day, the resident council assistant has 2-3 days to compile the minutes. That version of the minutes is shown to 1 or 2 residents on the council, however you've decided to do it, and the package goes right to the administrator. So by the next meeting, you already have a response to the concerns that were brought up, and you're not waiting a whole month to submit those concerns to the administrator. And for clarification, it's 10 calendar days, not 10 business days. There was some confusion with this because in another section of the act where it talks about the other way of submitting a complaint, it is 10 business days. But in this case, for residence council, it's 10 calendar days.
And I
Okay,
just want to mention, there is different ways that homes and councils will provide that answer back within those 10 days. It's not, it needs to be done with, to the president, not your RCA or your resident leaders or a group of residents, or even posted within those 10 days so that people can get that response within those 10 calendar days. Because sometimes what will happen is the response will come back, it'll go to the recreation or the resident council assistant, and then they wait till the next meeting to provide that answer. And that is not considered within the 10 days because it went to a staff member, not the council.
right. That's a good point. Did you know that right in the Fixing Long-Term Care Act, it mentions that the Minister of Long-Term Care is to consult with an organization that represents the interests of residents' councils. That's OARC, that's us. So many residents don't know this, and we're surprised when we go into homes that residents don't know that OARC is connecting with the Minister of Long-Term Care on a regular basis and sharing what it is that we're hearing coming out of residents' councils and coming out of homes. So if there are a lot of concerns about, the air conditioning or the visitor policy or all of these different things, we're able to hear those things from you, and then bring those to the minister. So we are in regular contact with the minister. We have a new one that we're going to meet shortly, but something for you to be aware of, that we do that. Okay, residence council assistant, we've provided a fact sheet here for you. And we spent some time talking about the council assistant in the first 2 parts of this series. So we won't spend too much time talking about this, just to let you know that there is a fact sheet here that's available for you. The council assistant is so important, a vital part of the council, and it's so important that there's a good relationship there and a good fit between the person who's been assigned to be the residence council and making sure that the council accepts that person and works well with that person, because they have a big role. We've already heard a couple of examples of important things that the council assistant does. And one of those is, validating resident experience, bringing issues that are not, might not be best handled at resident council to the other complaints and concerns pathway, and just making sure the minutes are responded to in time. So lots of important duties that the resident council assistant can fulfill. Just a reminder, the council assistant isn't the leader of the residence council. They are a support person. And we've met so many fantastic resident council assistants who truly are there to support and bring out the best in what the council could be. So thank you. If you're a resident council assistant and you're on the call today, we appreciate you so much.
Mm.
Okay, then we have some information about communication between the licensee or the administrator and the councils. These things we find are quite straightforward, and we haven't had many questions about them. If you do have a question about these, please put them in the question and answer box. This one here about interference, we don't have a resource for you, but it is something that we are considering developing, because we do get quite a few questions about interference, and we talked about this at part 1 and 2. So I won't spend too much time on that. So every single part of the act where it mentions residence councils is here for you to see. Consulting with the councils. So a funny story, sort of, at one home that we visited, the home interpreted this to mean that the council only had to meet every 3 months. And that's not what it means. It doesn't mean that the council only has to meet every 3 months. It means that the licensee or the administrator has to consult with the council every 3 months. So that could be asking to be invited to the meeting. That could be a standing item on your agenda. So, for every meeting in the year, when the administrator will be present, and you don't need to get permission. They have a standing invitation quarterly or however frequently your council decides. Okay, and then there are requirements for information for residents. So the resident information package that's given to every new person who moves into a long-term care home or to their family member or designate has to include information about the Resident Bill of Rights and also information about the Residence Council, including any information that the Residence Council would like to add in there. So for some homes, this looks like a paragraph that says, a resident council exists in this home, contact the resident council assistant for more information. At other homes, it's very, they've really customized it, and they've used our council brochure template to include information right in there that a resident could pull out afterwards and take a look at. In other homes, it's, a full photos of the council leaders and all kinds of things that are in there. So it really depends on what your council would like to share. There are rules about posting of information, what needs to be posted. And we want to just put a challenge or an idea out there for homes to keep in mind if you're the person who's responsible for ensuring that everything that needs to be posted is posted. Something to keep in mind is it enough to make sure everything is posted if the residents are unable to read it or to access it, or if the residents don't know where it is? Are you meeting the requirements set out in the legislation by having all of those things posted? Maybe they're posted like 6 feet high, that Mel and I wouldn't even be able to see them. Or maybe they're, hidden somewhere, or there's a glass in front of them or something like that. It's just not accessible to the people who want to look at it. So work with your residence council. It's a good opportunity to work with your council to find out what accessibility means to them and how you could make this information. It's required to be posted, so it's important. It's also important that the residents and the audience can read it and get the information from it.
Mhm.
One of those things that needs to be posted that we get some questions about is the council minutes. So some places we hear, the council doesn't want to post the resident council minutes. We're going to get in trouble because they have to be posted. It says right in the act, with the consent of the residents council. And, we have heard that, well, we told the inspector that the council doesn't want it to be posted. Something you can do that works really well is to have, instead of having the copy of the minutes, if your council has decided for whatever reason they don't want those posted, you could have a piece of paper there that says where you can access the minutes, or who to speak to get the minutes, and ensure that they are available for people who might like to see them. What's an even better idea is to find out why the council doesn't want to post the minutes. Sometimes it's something simple like full names are being used in the minutes and people don't feel comfortable with that.
Mhm.
So asking the question why don't they want it posted, if it is the case that they don't. The inspections also have to be posted. We talked about this. And we've shared here with you a slide deck. We had a webinar last year with the director of the inspections branch, and the slide deck is here shared. It goes through the different types of inspections, what residents can expect, and it's a great resource. Okay, we talked about the inspection report sharing as well, so we won't spend time on that.
Steph, just before we move on, there was a question to say, should it be documented that they consented to it being posted? So I just wanted to make notice that on our minute template, it actually has at the very bottom, a, a place for your resident leader to actually sign to say the minutes are approved and can be posted. And it even says in there and posted. So it is, when they sign your minutes, that is an indication that they are documenting, that it's documented that they can consent to post it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, and we've gone into the regulations part, and this next section is exactly like the section we were just in through the act. It goes through all of the places where residents' councils are mentioned and gives you the copy and paste directly from the act, the link here so that you can read the full act if you'd like, and the resources that we've recommended. That could be a fact sheet, it could be a webinar recording, it could be an external resource, so something that one of our partners in the sector has created that works really well. And that's all there. We've covered these in the previous two, so we won't spend time on them. I wanted to go over to the questions. And if you have a look at this today or tomorrow and have more questions about it, please reach out to us. Like I said, join the resident forum tomorrow, where we'll spend more time going through what we've shared today, if you have any questions. And look forward to seeing you there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other and see the questions.
There is one just about how long are the minutes posted for, and I was just gonna write an answer, but we can say it out loud too. It really depends on how long your resident council would like them to be posted for. So I would bring that to the council and ask how long you guys can sort of decide. A lot of times I'll see the month or 2 months posted, and then the rest of them are in a binder that's still available and accessible. In that same posted area, they might have like one of those folder things with the binder, and they'll have the last year in that binder, and then just posted on the board is 1 month or 2 months.
Thanks for that. That's a great suggestion. There's something else. We have a frequently asked questions document also on our website that that's one of the questions that's asked is how long do we have to keep minutes for? So I'll make sure to update this document that we just shared to ensure that that frequently asked questions is in there.
That's a good idea.
And since we are at 3 o'clock and we don't have any more questions coming through, so I'll just take one last look at the questions that were submitted through the registration. There are some questions about how to get more people interested in the Residents Council. So if we haven't been able to answer your question today, we do have everything that was submitted through the registration. And something to keep an eye out for is subsequent webinars where we might talk about these things. So resident engagement in councils is a big topic that comes up periodically, but frequently. And so that is something that we might be able to cover in a future webinar. Thanks for bringing that up. The
Yeah,
title, yeah, the
I was
title of
just gonna say, when people register and you do put in those questions, we do use them to be able to inform what we're gonna be providing for in education in other ways as well. So the webinar is just not one way that we will try to answer those questions. So keep sending them in, even if we haven't answered it on a webinar, because you might get it answered in a different way.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for attending today. Please take a moment to fill out the survey that will pop up when you exit out of Zoom. This document that we share today will be emailed to all of our registrants, and we hope to see you soon. As always, it's been a pleasure to be here with you for this past hour. Thank you so much for your participation, for your attention, for your questions, and we look forward to seeing your comments come through the evaluation. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.